Welcome back to Yin and Yang, the podcast. This is James, aka Young. I'm joined here with my co-host Dan, aka Yin, and I'm here with Aileen Cho, a drama therapist, marriage counselor, and all-around awesome person. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. Yay!
Happy to
Yay.
be here. Yay. Thanks for having
Uh,
me.
Yeah, definitely. Just a quick intro for Aileen. First of all, we met at UCSD. We were part of the first Asian American theater festival.
That's right.
Back at that was many years ago, and she is a licensed professional offering psychotherapeutic services in both English and Korean. She is a second generation Korean American cisgender female clinician licensed in the state of California. All right. And and today we'd love to talk to you about your background, your work, and and we were just chatting offline again about how you're taking the time for doing this. We really appreciate it because you're in the midst of a busy season for you, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was telling Dan I have a 3.5-year-old, and then the second baby's coming in 2 months. So he
Wow.
caught me at a good time.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and doing this. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
I
that's so
mean,
happy.
to start, yeah. So start off, how are you feeling today? How's it going?
Oh, we're doing a check-in.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I very pregnant, very tired. I was saying I feel like my brain is shrinking, which they say actually does happen. So that's validating that I'm not just losing it. But I don't know if your wife, if Jennifer had the same experience, but
Yes.
that last trimester, it's just like I can't find words, I'm forgetting things. The mom brain has kicked in. But yeah, this is like a happy distraction. I think I'm really glad to be here. And I was telling James that I checked out a few episodes just to kind of get the vibe. And I just thought it was so wonderful to see two Asian American men hold space for each other to talk about like really, serious, vulnerable, intimate things and also not. Like it was just, I thought it was really sweet, the relationship that you two have.
Oh,
So I
thank
was like,
you. Yeah.
perfect first podcast to be
Cool.
on.
Oh yeah. So for our listeners, this is Aileen's first podcast, so we are so happy to have her on. And I know just I was just telling her that for guests, Dan and I, we have groups, we have our social circles that we try and reach out to, and it's very interesting to see the trajectory. How people from where we first met them. Like, so I met Aileen, as I mentioned, in theater and as an actress, as an actor. And it's interesting to see her trajectory into like drama therapy, which makes
Yeah.
sense given her your theater background, and also into like clinical practice in therapy. So, and I personally found like, oh, that's super interesting because for myself, I've always been interested in like psychology, and if I was always thinking like in a different life, maybe I would have a career in that path, maybe school counselor or something like that. Because
Mhm.
I do find that work, or I really respect the work that you do and your peers do in the field. So,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. So to get it started, sorry, Dan, did you have anything or do you want to add
No,
or
no,
yeah.
we can keep on going here and try to figure out more about Aileen's background and how she got to where she's at.
Yeah. So before we start, let's go to the past. Let's talk about your background a little bit. I only know
Sure.
you mainly from like our interactions in college, but I didn't we didn't really get to speak too much about like, your upbringing or like where you come from.
Sure.
So yeah, like we'd
Yeah, I was
like to
like,
hear about
how
that.
back? Yeah, how way back? You want to go?
I mean, where were you born and raised, I guess. Let's start there.
Yeah, so let's see. I'll go back and share my background that I think will relate kind of to where I've ended up or my path or how it's sort
Sure.
of influenced me. So I was born in Los Angeles, first American born child of my immigrant family. But what's unique about that is that my mother's side of the family were North Korean refugees during the
Oh,
war. So they're like blood and their hometown is
yeah.
North Korea. And after they fled, my mother was born in the South. She's like number 6 or 5 or 6. She's a twin on children of 7.
Wow.
And so they fled. My grandmother, so my maternal grandmother, so she fled with her children. From what I know, her entire family never escaped. So it's been a lifelong estrangement. She's passed a
Right.
long time ago.
Oh.
So yeah, so that family was the family that then immigrated to the US. And I think around the 80s, that was very common, especially for North Koreans, because it was kind of like this mentality of we can't go back home anyway. Like no, there like
Yeah.
let's go and find, yeah, if we're gonna move to the South, then we might as well go venture out everywhere else. So I think there's a lot, like a big cohort of North Korean, specifically North Korean immigrants around that time in the 80s. And then my father came with my mother. But on my father's side, what's also unique is, or interesting is, he was, I think his father passed really when he was young, and his mother was trying to raise her kids, as a widow, and it was during the Japanese colonial rule. And so he was like kind of sold into this Japanese teacher's home, and essentially was like a child slave
Oh,
until he was legal. So he was also sort of like this kind of translator and cultural broker for like the Japanese home, and then like Korea, like the Korean
right.
people. So he was fluent in Japanese
Mm.
and Korean, and then like later Chinese, because I think he then went to China and whatnot. So I'm just sharing this because I think there's a backdrop of intergenerational trauma that I was kind of like born into.
Yeah.
As sort of this new like hopeful generation, because I'm also like the first kid that's born in the US when um, my mother and her my mother, my mother, her husband, my dad, and like my mother's side of the family, all like half of the family immigrated to the United States in the 80s.
Mm.
Um, so growing up, um, I was like the only kind of, I was like one of those kids where, like when family gathers, like I'm at the adult table, just kind of like listening to what the adults have to say,
Mm.
more than like playing with the kids. And I think my grandmother had a lot of grandchildren, but I, for somehow, like have received a lot of the stories. So I'm sort of like the keeper of like facts and all the rumors and secrets and like I'm the keeper of stories because I just loved listening to her share, or like adults kind of share essentially trauma stories. So I
Oh,
think
wow.
like I'd like to think that I just was really interested in people at such a young age and stories. And with all the intergenerational trauma, I myself have not really grown up in one place, James. So I think my answer is really long when you say like, oh, where were you born and brought up? Because I was born here, but we ended up moving quite a bit. Like me and my sister were uprooted from like our schools and our wherever we were living quite a bit, because my dad was really trying to find work and like trying to rebuild, and things didn't work out. So I've lived in Korea and then like plucked from there and lived in like middle of nowhere in Arizona,
Oh,
like back in the like before 2000s. And so I like the stories of my life, and then like sort of my history or my background has a lot of themes around like disconnect and like separation and estrangement, because there's a whole side of the family in the north that they've never had, could reunite or reconnect.
right.
So bridging has been sort of like a theme of my life, whether it's like
Mm.
bringing people together or bringing oneself to, oneself. Um, and so I think that these were kind of like building blocks that were there before I even considered the career of becoming a therapist or
Mm.
therapy. Um, Truthfully, I did not know that there was a job like yeah, I mean, mental health is really hot right now. It's a hot topic, and there's like a lot of movies and shows that show, therapists. But gosh, yeah, when I was an undergrad, you're right. I was in theater. I was pursuing that. I wasn't really considering any other career at the time. But what you didn't know was I was in my own therapy for the first time in my life in college,
Oh.
uh, at the same time. So yeah, I was like pursuing theater, acting, and then I was in my own therapy. And I had been given opportunities and like referred to like go to counseling in high school because there was quite a bit of kind of like family trauma and dealing with mental health issues in my family.
Mm.
And I was like I was a high school kid, so I was like, I'm not going to talk to a stranger, and
Yeah, yeah.
I don't need therapy. But um, yeah, my 4 years in UCSD was really colored by the work in theater of like the power of theater and drama and
Mm.
storytelling, but then being in my own therapy. And I think this is a pretty common thing. People graduate and from college, and it's like your whole life has been kind of structured with going grade by grade, and then all of a sudden, like, go, go,
Be free.
go and be
Yeah.
free, be an adult, go and do life. And I was in the industry for like maybe a year. I had an agent. The last play that I did, Dan, was with
With
your
Jen.
wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The Three Sisters. And I had an opportunity to try out art therapy.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
And I was like so blown away by this concept of using projection, metaphor, not words, but images. And I think I remember asking the art therapist, like, is there such thing as like drama therapy or theater therapy or psychodrama? And she was like, yeah, actually there is. And I Googled it, and the field must have been like 30 years. So it was like fairly young for a field, that's
Right.
Mm.
did my research, and I just like at the time there were two grad schools that were accredited for drama therapy. It was NYU and CIIS, California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And so yeah, that was 2010. I
Mm.
pursued my master's degree in drama therapy, and then simultaneously to get licensed to become a marriage and family therapist. Um, yeah, so that's like my genesis story of
Yeah.
I've ended up in this career. Um, yeah.
That's amazing. So there's this major separation in your family then, from what I hear. If I'm correct, it was your mom, so your grandmother,
My
your
grandmother.
okay, so
Yeah.
that generation, so your mom up, that whole side is you, there was that feeling of a bad, there was a the you there's no reconnection there, because
Yeah, I mean, when my grandmother was
that's
alive, she thought they would, reopen up the borders and, you know,
mm,
at the 30th parallel, because they didn't know it was going to be such a forever thing. And
yeah.
she never got to see, I believe she had like three brothers, and her parents, and yeah, her whole extended side of North Korea. And when I say intergenerational trauma, what's really interesting is like that's a forced disconnect, right? Like it
Yes.
wasn't by choice. But
Yeah.
what's interesting then to see the next generation is like estrangements happening among siblings, or like amongst
Oh,
family
interesting.
members, because
Mm,
because it's like, how do you you would think that the connection is so precious and valuable,
mm,
but also not having like model, like how do you stay in relationship and in connection and in community when there is
mm.
this big trauma, this rupture, and a lot of pain and suffering. And so I also see there's also like more immediate kind of cutting off or estrangement I've noticed in within the younger generations.
So
And I
Oh,
think
so
every family has, has these fractured relationship, but I'd like to think
mm.
there's a connection or a
wait,
theme.
when you say younger generation, are you talking about your generation or
My
your
generation,
mom's?
or even like, yeah, my mom's, her and her siblings,
Oh,
I guess the boomers,
right.
and then like, or with their children. Um, but I mean, I guess that exists in a lot of families.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of
Um,
thing happens, but I mean, was it like something specific that happens, or like was there an incident, or it's just like people just start drifting apart because they lived in different places?
no, like family dramas,
Oh,
that too, the drifting apart. I mean, yeah, they're everywhere, right?
yeah.
Yeah, not just in Korea, but
So
anywho, that's been on my mind.
oh yeah, sorry. So for our listeners who are not familiar with this term intergenerational trauma. Like how would you
Yeah.
define it, or is there like a clinical term for or a clinical definition for it?
Well, the way I like to kind of think about it is that now there's actual research that shows it's not just genetics that get passed on
Oh,
to
wow.
your children, but especially on, I think because of the caring of the baby, uh,
Mm,
that whatever your grandmother went through while she was, carrying your mother's eggs or your mother, actually, there's genetic markers that show um, like what if trauma has happened or if something traumatic has happened that there it does affect the fetus and that gets passed down.
oh,
um
wow.
yeah. So it's not just like the color of your eyes or your skin that gets passed on, but life experiences. I mean, we see
Mm,
this so clearly with the African American community, right? In
mm,
terms of post-traumatic, they've coined the term like slave syndrome. But the PTSD gets passed on, but not just with what happened, but I mean, if you have a traumatized generation, I mean, you're a parent, Dan, so you know, but it's like children are such a mirror to what you need to work on or to
Right.
like your
Right.
triggers and your buttons.
Yes.
And we have these concepts and terminologies that we can talk about now, but I mean, my parents didn't have the internet. Neither did my grandparents. I mean, there was just no knowledge that your way of rearing children is affected by the way that that you were affected, not just in parenting, but I mean, talk about, you know, um, like really intense collective trauma when
Right.
mm,
you're in survival mode. It's like life or death. You're not going to be attuned and emotionally conscious
mm,
and near your child. So I think there's like a lot that goes that's there's a lot of elements that gets funneled into this concept of intergenerational trauma, but it's essentially that things that happen from one generation does affect the next unless there's really intentional and conscious work that gets done to heal. And I think that's
mm.
also why, a lot of millennials and Gen Zs are in therapy because they're like, holy shit, these boomers and like, generations before had so much trauma and we're doing the work to heal and break whatever cycles, unhealthy or toxic cycles of coping that's
I,
been
I
passed
find
down.
I find it pretty amazing that you, at such a young age, you were able to, recognize. Well, I guess first that's the initial resistance of well, why should I talk to the stranger? But past that, you opened yourself up to therapy. I'm curious to like for maybe young people who are listening, like what made you make that choice, or what's advice you would give to someone who would like, oh, maybe I have some issues I need to work through. Should I see a therapist? Or
Mhm.
maybe it's not that big of a deal. Maybe I'll just tough it out. Like what for you personally, what was that kind of switch to like, you know what, I need help,
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, how much time do we got today? Um, I mean, there certainly were things that I felt like, okay, I can't handle this on my own. Um, we can call them symptoms or just feeling like my ways of how I dealt with things is just not working. But I
Mm,
also think that college is a very common time for young folks to go to therapy because you've never left. Typically, you haven't left your nest of your family of origin, and you're finally like kind of in this life stage of being an independent, adult. Um, but there's like things that maybe needs to be processed or addressed, and you start to see things. I think college is also when you start to kind of think and look back and have perspective or some distance about how you were raised and all the things that have happened up until college. And it's free, right? Like college mental health, college counseling is accessible. I mean, therapy in general has become way more accessible nowadays, so that's really great. But yeah, I think the space and distance from my family really kind of opened up that window to go, okay, well, like what was that like for me, or like what is my experience. And I think that's especially true for Asian American or Asian folks where we come from a collectivistic culture where like
mm,
the group's needs or the group's harmony
Yeah.
is more important, right, than my own needs, um, and my own, individual kind of story. So I think that kind of played a role too, that the distance, not living in the
Mm,
home.
Right.
I see. Yeah. And did you have how were those first steps into therapy? Was it pretty like, oh, this is awesome, or it's like, you know what, this is not really working for me? I know for myself, yes, I had a resistance to like going to therapy for fear of like being labeling myself as not there's something wrong with me, I guess, right?
Right.
And labeling myself that, oh, uh I am, you know there's a lot of conflicting things going on when I before I sought therapy. But when I eventually did seek out therapy, I did notice that yes, it was super helpful to have that other like soundboard, talking with someone. And so this is something I talked with Dan about, is that at the end of the day, they cannot solve my problem. They're just helping me process and maybe give me some tools to
Mhm,
process these issues that I have in my life. So for
mhm,
yourself, how was that foray into therapy for you? And then I guess obviously it then inspired you, and seeing the art therapy eventually inspired you to your current path, right?
mhm. I mean, I think it was so liberating to be able to explore and seek my truth and know that
Mm.
this person wasn't gonna judge me or tell me what to do with it. Really, like, hold space. I think I've heard you both kind of mention, that terminology. Um, yeah, yeah, it was liberating. So,
Mm,
so helpful. And to kind of have my sort of home base where I didn't feel the burden to, like, I don't know, reciprocate or take care of them or wonder about,
mm.
how they're doing. Especially I call it the or I don't call it this, but there's like a terminology in Korean, like the Korean eldest daughter syndrome, the K
Oh.
Changyo syndrome, where it's like you're kind of like the second mother hen, taking care of the whole family. And so we can call it people pleasing tendencies, or like really being in that caretaking mode. It was a really special time to kind of go like, wait a minute, like, what is my experience? What's my truth? Um, yeah, I thought that was just so powerful. And then to combine that with, the theater work that we were doing and getting to
Mm,
step into other characters and different stories and tell stories and express myself in ways that I normally, as me in my real world, could not ever or
all right.
like that was, yeah, it was such a powerful concoction that made me kind of discover a whole new way of being, I think.
Were these therapists, uh, let's get real. Were they white
Mhm.
or?
Yeah, actually my first therapist was white.
Okay.
But she was also a licensed clinical social worker, so I think she always kind of brought in some of the systemic lens. And we're talking, this is like early 2000s. um,
Mm,
but then my therapist after her, I mean, I've been like on and off in therapy for over a decade.
mm.
My second therapist was Korean American,
Oh,
and
wow.
I think that was rare, and probably another factor into why I felt motivated to get into the field, because there was like no Asian, therapist to begin with, and then to have, a Korean American female
Okay.
be my
Yeah.
next therapist was also so powerful. And yeah, helpful and unique, um, different than my white therapist. But
Mm.
I've had white, Asian, mixed, male, female, young, old.
Do you find that having maybe a similar cultural background is helpful? I know you mentioned in your blog post about Asian Americans don't do therapy. That's the title. Yeah.
Clickbait. I know.
Yeah.
It's a good one because people are like, what?
And you do mention that, yes, having that cultural lens, or maybe having someone. I know a friend of mine, she specifically sought out, a woman of color, not necessarily she's
Yeah,
Asian
exactly.
American, but she's
Mhm.
like, okay, I'll get the next best thing. Is there Asian? Does anyone know a therapist that is a woman of color? And then I think she eventually landed on like a a Jewish woman who
Yeah.
who has a lot of Black friends, but basically, regardless of the therapist's race, that person understood, brought some
Yeah.
cultural understanding to her practice, and that was something my friend really appreciated. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there does seem to be a dearth of Asian Americans in your field, the
Mhm.
mental health field.
Mhm.
Do you think there's a reason for that? Or I know you outlined some reasons why Asian Americans don't do therapy, but yeah, not so many are going into the practice either. Do you see that? Is that still the
There's
case or
been
is
a
that changing?
huge no,
Yeah.
especially after, I mean, I started to see the numbers grow. I mean, when I was in school, this is 2010, um, it was only me and one other Asian cohort member in a cohort of 17,
Oh,
let's say. But I mean, and then like when you look up online on Google or Psychology Today, like maybe a handful of or less. And now, I mean, it's pages. Like you have so many options. Like it's
oh.
too many options now, and you can get really specific on, what identities you want your therapist to hold. Um, but the big change that I really truly felt was during the pandemic.
Mm.
Because before then, my practice was always a bit of a mix, and because I speak Korean, I'd have some Korean clients and Asian American clients. But during, I think it was when I came back from my first maternity leave in 2021, I got filled up so quickly, and 99% of my caseload were Asian Americans.
Wow.
And the amount of calls I was getting and my colleagues were getting, it was just, I felt like we were spending more time trying to find referrals for people. And this was specifically after that Atlanta spa shootings,
Oh,
right?
Oh,
It happened
yeah.
during COVID, but I mean the number of calls was unlike anything I had experienced before in my like private practice career. And
mm.
since then, I mean, it's not like I say I only see Asian Americans, but my practice is 100%. All my clients right now are, no, yeah, like 95% are uh,
Wow.
Asian Americans. Yeah. So more people are seeking, and there's more providers, more clinicians, which is great.
And then your clientele mostly being Asian American, are they mostly Korean American or are they just like
Oh,
all
it's a
different
mix.
backgrounds? Yeah.
Yeah, mix. And some are mixed race, or sometimes I see couples. So like one
Yeah.
partner is,
Right.
and if it's a bicultural couple, so yeah, a good mix.
Mm. Are there
Interesting.
specific issues you've seen with your Asian American clients that maybe are specific to Asian Americans that maybe like basically like for uh I know for myself yeah, there you mentioned a little bit of that butting of heads between like collectivist identity versus individualistic identity in the West. So like in the
Mhm.
East, there's like this collectivist mentality, and this is something I see with my wife. My wife is Japanese, and
Mhm.
I noticed that there's this budding that happens, unconsciously or consciously sometimes. So
Totally.
yeah, is that a common thread, or what are other some common threads that you see with that you can speak to publicly, I guess say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, happy to. I mean, in terms of my, I guess, work experience, I've been on the whole spectrum of kind of mental health severities, meaning like I've worked at inpatient psychiatric units where they're not there by, will. It's not like they signed a consent, but they're
Mm,
on hold from not being able to keep themselves safe, or others safe, to residential programs, to partial hospitalization programs, inpatient, and then now like outpatient in my private practice, I would say is like the lightest form in terms of like these people are mostly healthy and well functioning, and I've seen prominent figures in our society,
oh
and
wow.
big CEOs to teens. It's, I
Mm,
think, there's not a lack of variety in terms of not just the ethnic piece, but like where people are coming from and what they do, and class and all that. But I think what makes it um, extra challenging when it comes to any sort of BIPOC communities is that, okay, so you've got the mental health, like the regular mental health stuff that does not discriminate, by the way, right, of
mm,
any
Right.
particular group. And then you've got, familial relationship stuff that does not discriminate any particular group. It's just, this is life. This is this is what happens with humans. We suffer because of relationships. And then you've got, like you say, then like the cultural um, inner conflicts, but also like familial conflict, intergenerational trauma. So it just really makes things very much more complex. You know, it's like easier said than done to, just follow these steps or just do this one exercise or use this one approach to change and feel better.
Mm,
I often find Asian American clients having such a strong will or desire for change, but
mm,
feeling really gridlocked by um, both systems that they feel trapped in, but also, and I think this is where a lot of white clinicians don't quite fully get that it's not just a choice. The systems that we're in terms of families and relationships is also our lifeline. It's
Right.
not
ah,
just something that you can
mm,
like set a boundary, set a boundary and
right.
just say no, mom, or no, dad, no,
Yeah.
dad. And I think being able having someone to being able to understand that and then hold that
Right.
just in and of itself, right? That's not a solve, but just to go, there's nothing wrong with you. This is
Mm,
hard. And some people do choose to then like, whatever, set boundaries, say no, put distance. But I think it's important to not make it seem so like it's like easy, like it's on the person to just solve these, long and like deeply embedded cultural beliefs and values. And so I've got some
mm,
like theories that they're not written anywhere and they're not coined anywhere.
mm.
But is it okay if I share like a couple?
Yeah, yes, of
Please.
course.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
like I call it the time capsule theory. And because I have worked with, like, if I'm seeing Koreans or Korean Americans, they're kind of all along the spectrum of like just have immigrated, from Korea to like third generation. I can't speak a lick of Korean, but the Korean is in me.
Right.
And I have noticed that uh, parents who have immigrated and have raised their children um, actually have even more archaic and conservative values that they use to parent their kids than the parents back home. So, meaning like if your parents immigrated in the 60s, they're going to
Right.
operate from values from the 60s and say this is the tradition, this is the belief or value that our culture um, lives by or whatnot.
Mm,
And so you're raising a kid in the 80s with 60s, whatever, Korean values. But then when you actually go look in Korea, like they've continued to live and evolve and are
Right.
way more progressive.
mm,
Um, so like, for instance, like my career clients, right? They're the parents like, there are no gay people in Korea. It's like, actually, no, there's a ton of gay people. They've got an LGBTQ group and, they allow same-sex marriage. So that's sort of like an example, but there's a time capsule theory. And so like children here are actually brought up with even more outdated um, ways of parenting and like what their culture, their home culture
Right.
or their parents' culture is, that it's really sad because there's already a gap in terms of generation, just natural generation. There's
Right.
the gap with the language. And then now there's this phantom time gap where it's like I'm living in the 60s at home where,
mm,
and then I'm having to deal with 80s America or whatever,
Yes.
and so I just which leads me to the next point, which is not my theory, but like a lot of times in therapy the work is, here's the map of the world that I've been given, and the actual world that I'm living in day to day today, there's such cognitive dissonance. Like this is not matching, like none of the signs are updated, none of the roads are, and to recalibrate, right? Like, okay, like what are some of the things from the old map that I've been given that I can hold on to because it's a part of who I am and my identity and my
yeah.
culture? And then like, what is really working and not working for me right now in terms of, how to live my life, how to make life choices, how to be. Um, and so I think unpacking that, that's something that I've noticed
Mm,
working with Asian Americans, the disconnect.
Right.
yeah.
I also do family therapy. So, when I'm doing like parent and children work, it's literal language miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
also the time piece and the value piece, and yeah, and so to go back to the bridging, like I love the work of getting,
Mm,
two parties to take conflict and then turn it into kind of deeper understanding and connection with each other,
mm,
because they both want the same thing. We all want the same thing, right? We all want to be understood,
Right.
um, to connect, and
yeah.
there's just so many things that like fucks it up.
Yeah, for sure.
When you have the family therapy sessions, have you ever had a family with a boomer generation and our
Yes,
generation?
yes,
Oh,
many, so many.
really?
Yes,
Oh, that's interesting.
That's
Because I don't
so
think,
interesting.
so many.
yeah, the boomer generation, our parents' generation, I don't think I can never imagine them going to therapy. And they are the ones who totally need it, but they're the ones who are the most opposed to it, I think.
For
They'll be
yeah,
like, what?
to our listeners,
$200? What? Are you
$2 for a
crazy?
stranger to
I
like
can
tell me
buy.
what to do.
Do you know how much cabbage I can buy? How much groceries I can buy with that? Like,
It's a
yeah,
year-long kimchi. Yeah, that's like a
yeah,
year-long kimchi supply right there.
yeah.
A hack or a tip for the listeners to get boomer parents into therapy is if it's about you. I think
Hmm.
they're so um, centered around the children doing well or being well that if it's like about you needing help,
Yeah,
that often gets them through the door.
right.
And then if you have a
Ah,
good therapist who really understands that generation and can like talk to them, then like I think the trust gets built there.
yeah.
But yeah, never if it's about them. Like they don't
They don't need it. Well, they
they
think
don't
they
need
don't need it.
therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't think they need therapy.
And have you, in your practice, have you found that it's helped you personally in your own life? Like, I guess, is there like I guess you personally seek therapy yourself, right?
Yes.
Yes, and then you also, I know for like Dan and I, we teach martial arts, and as a teacher, we learn martial arts from teachers, but when we teach it, it seems that we incorporate those lessons, or like, wait, am I actually practicing this? Like I'm teaching
Mhm.
it, but am I walking the walk, right?
Right.
So have you found that, from learning and from taking therapy and also being a therapist yourself, has that improved your life, like in your relationships in your family?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, uh, yes, and I always tell my clients that when it comes to other people in our lives, like we can't change them. You
Yes.
can only
Mm,
change yourself. So I also, yes, it's helped me, but I also know the limitations of therapy. It's not like a absolute cure all. And, not every family therapy or couples therapy is a success story.
ah,
But in our field in our field, there's also this, because we're trained, but also we have like legal and ethical responsibilities. It's also important to not take on cases or issues that you probably have a lot of like bias in, or
ah,
because right, the first thing's like do no harm, and
Right.
also if you're so what for whatever reason, if it's an uncomfortable topic for you, if it's something you're going through in the moment with your client, with it, you're probably not the best person to be in like the helping role.
mm,
So the fancy term we use is countertransference, but it's like our own personal feelings about the client or whatever issues that they're bringing in. Something to kind of always kind of be aware of knowing what my limitations and boundaries are. But I have colleagues that I consult with. Supervision has ended once I got licensed, but we're always kind of having to really look at ourselves and go like, is this a case that I can actually help and am equipped to handle, um, is what I wanted to add to your
mm.
question.
And and sorry if this is too personal, let me know. But like,
Oh,
how has marriage been for you? And then eventually from marriage to, I'm a newlywed I'm a
I heard
newlywed, and thank you
congratulations.
very much. And the both of you are further along than I am, as far as but I'm curious to hear how marriage was for you, how marriage is for you, and eventually motherhood. Yeah.
um Gosh, I think what I wanted to add from the previous question to this to kind of like segue is that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
for instance during COVID, right? Like where we were all going through it. And when I say all, like the therapists were going through it too at like the same time, right? So for instance, like if I was going through a divorce right now, I would probably be self-advising and advice from colleagues to not work with couples on the brink of divorce because I'm deep within
Uh,
it personally. But COVID was a whole, like probably a unique circumstance that has never happened before where therapists, the providers were also in it with, the clients and like, uh, as we're giving reassurance in the back of our minds, we're like, I don't know, are we okay? Is this gonna be okay? Like, I don't
are we
know, like
okay?
people around me,
Yeah.
yeah, are we okay? Like, people around me in my personal life are dying too. And um, am I equipped to help? But yeah, the marriage piece, let's see, we've been married for this is our fourth year. We'll be on our fifth anniversary.
Mm.
Thank you. Um, in September, but I think we got pregnant real fast. So it was almost like marriage and baby happened so quickly.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Congratulations.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Some
but
people
we,
try for years. Yeah.
I know. That's what we thought too. We were like, oh, everyone around us is like, fertility is like really hard, so we should, get on it. And then it was just like,
Bam.
bam, exactly. So, um, it was hard. I mean, we were together before we got married for, I don't know, like 4, 5 years, living together. We were, a couple. And
Yeah.
then
Right.
marriage happened with a kid. So when you ask me, going into year 5 soon, of how marriage has been, like so hard.
Oh,
Because even when we track like marital satisfaction, like on a
Yes.
graph, with different life stages and things like that happen, and it's like this. And then as soon as you add the first kid, the pin drops off the graph.
oh,
Yes.
wow.
Like it's like it's no longer even on the graph.
Wait, where is this graph? Is it on the internet
We could try to find it. That is how hard adding a child is on a marriage,
Oh,
on a couple.
wow.
So my answer is a little complicated. It's not that marriage has been hard. It's just that marriage happened, baby happened, and it was a COVID baby. He was born in 2020.
Right.
We didn't even have
Whoa.
support. Like we couldn't even have support because we were quarantined. Um, so I don't think my marriage was hard. I think the circumstances that our marriage was, yeah, started off,
Uh,
it was hard. But
that's tough. Yeah, especially during COVID. Yeah. So then you can't have the grandparents come in and like take care of the
no
baby.
one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
no
Wow.
one. I mean, he was luckily able to be there when I gave birth, but yeah, it was tough. Whew.
Yeah.
And why it took so long for us to decide on having another one. We have to keep telling ourselves like it's not COVID anymore. It's not COVID anymore.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you made it through. You made it through.
Yeah. But do you have specific questions about marriage?
Yeah.
Um, I,
Well, I think, well, for your husband, does he come from a similar cultural background or not necessarily? No.
Filipino American, doesn't speak a lick of Tagalog.
Oh.
Born and raised in one place down in San Diego.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
so I
Oh,
mean,
Yeah.
oh, Dan.
Huh?
Dan's San Diego
What?
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, San Diego and Bay Area. We have like two points of connection. Well, now
Yeah.
you're in LA.
I'm in LA. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in LA right now too.
I'm in Japan,
Yeah.
so I'm disconnected.
Disconnected, estranged.
Strange,
Um,
yes, yes. Yeah,
yeah.
so I guess specific questions about marriage. One was like so coming from different cultural backgrounds, kind of segueing from like so even though that you and your husband have different cultural background, you're still both Asian American. So
Mhm.
there is some thread there, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And I know for myself, I don't know if you work with international couples or couples with very different backgrounds. Do you see
Yes.
sometimes there's like the abutting of heads, and maybe there certain tools or resolutions that you've discovered in your practice? Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Even if you come from the exact same culture and have the
Mm,
exact same upbringing, you're naturally going to have conflict.
yeah.
And I think what's really interesting about couples is that it's it's a choice, right? You've chosen this other person as your partner. You know, you said, yes, I do. It wasn't
Yeah.
like when we're born into a family where it's like, I didn't ask for this. And so there, you know, the bond is like we're coming together to be one unit. So I think what disturbs partners and couples, and I resonate, is that when there is some sort of a disagreement, like when we don't align, it's like really disturbing. It's like, but I
Yeah.
chose you because I love you and I want you and I want to be together. But what you don't agree with, you know, how I live, or you know,
Right.
like how we're gonna go about this. So that's already baked in to couples, no matter what. So then you add, right, the not just culture in terms of like you say your wife is Japanese and
Yeah.
you're Taiwanese, right, James?
I'm Taiwanese American.
Taiwanese
Yeah.
American, yeah. Not just that, but I mean, not just like the ethnic differences, but each family has very different values. And when I say culture, I'm kind of like using that like across the board,
Right.
not just ethnic backgrounds. So yeah, I have front row seats to intimate and vulnerable details of what couples are fighting about and struggling with um,
Mm.
in our modern day and age.
Would you say maybe communication is maybe the main issue there? Like
Big
misunderstanding,
one?
like I say A, but it's perceived as B, like why?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like resolution, yeah, I'm wondering. I saw that you work with the Gottman theory method, and
Some of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, some of that. So I saw that. I was like, oh, maybe I'll check out the book. So because yeah, I wonder. It's like it's like maybe my own, or so let's say in general sense, like not to maybe certain couples are stuck in certain modes of thinking, and and they think their worldview is correct,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
And I'm right. Why
Of
is this
course. I'm
person
always
what
right,
yeah,
James.
why is this person
What's
not on the
wrong?
program, right? They're not getting on my program, right? And then
And they
is
love me. If they love me, they
right.
need to get on board.
Right. So I guess would you say so where is that part, where is that place of compromise for communication for couples? Like if you were going to give like advice on like communication between couples, let's say let's give an example. For instance, maybe this couple's going on a vacation and then you know I want they're going on vacation to go see some family, right? And then maybe one person is like, you know what, I want to stay a little bit longer with my family. Why don't you head back home, wherever home is first, and I'm gonna stay. But then the other person's like, wait, are we not going as a couple, going and coming back together? Stuff like that. There's different value ideas. So yeah, I wonder how do you work through something with a couple going through something similar like that? Yeah. It
I
could
mean,
be
couples
something
bring
mundane
in,
or bigger. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. They bring in like concrete stuff in all the time. And we all fight about the same things, or, you know, couples will have the like a recurring fight, the fight that they always have over and over and
Mm,
over again. But I mean, when it comes down to communication, we think we're good. All of us think we're good listeners, myself included. And we are the worst listeners when it comes to the people that we live with.
yeah. Mm,
You know, and so that's a big thing, like learning true listening skills. And because we are constantly with the people that we live with, I'm going to say not just couples, but family, we get kind of lazy in terms of really being curious about the certain questions or the certain comments that they are always saying. Because I have conversations in my head of, I could literally write out a script of like how a certain dialogue will go with me and my husband, right? But
mm,
like, how often do we kind of stop and go, wait, well, I'm curious, like he keeps mentioning this one word or this one phrase, like what is that really about? Like what is that like what, what's the intention? If we're going back to kind of
mm.
theater work, where is that stemming from? um but as a clinician, when people are bringing in concrete issues like that, kind of more specific disagreement, and we really get into weeds of what happened and how are we going to work it out, you kind of miss the whole, you miss the more important picture of
Mm.
what's going on. But I mean, marriage, yeah. So if there's anyone that I really look up to as sort of like the guru of couples therapy, but also just generally of mental health, is Esther Perel. I don't know
Esther
if
Perel.
that's a
Okay.
name that is familiar. Oh my gosh, big fan of her. But she talks a lot about how much marriage and what it is and what it is meant for has changed in just a generation or two in the
Mm,
history of mankind. That is that right now in our today, partners are being asked of so much, that there's
mm,
so many expectations that are being placed on the couple. Because even family therapy, it never started with the couple. Couples therapy is probably the youngest constellation and like approach in the field of therapy, because family therapy really started with treating children. It was like the
Mm,
children were having issues, and
right.
then they bring in the family, and you're looking at the whole constellation. Um, but yeah, I think the expectations from our partners, or the expectations that we have on our partners, is what's really making or breaking couples. Because back in the day, marriage meant it was for survival, and it was for
mm.
economic reasons, really, right? To have children, to buy property, to then have a family of your own, your community.
Right.
And that was it. And roles and expectations were very clear, especially because religion was also heavily involved, right? Everyone knew what to do, everyone knew what their place was, everyone knew what tasks were expected of them. And
Mm.
then she goes into much more detail about sort of the timeline, but then it's like marrying for love happens. Her probably her most famous book is called Mating in Captivity. I highly
Mating cap.
recommend.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just all about sex, but it's far from it. It's
Yeah.
Mm.
really about eroticism in the sense of like life force, um, not just sex. But um, so romanticism, and then there's the oh my gosh, mom brain has kicked in.
It's
Before the
okay.
identity economy, it's the service economy. So
Mm.
what can this person do for me? And
Mm,
this is where a lot of couples get caught up of like, well, I'm doing this and you're not doing this, and the fights about what they're giving to
right.
you as a partner. And this also goes hand in hand with sort of this like capitalistic consumer culture, right? Like we click and we buy the thing, and then if it doesn't do the thing, then we're going to return it. And like what I signed up for. So expectations there, but then now the generation that we're entering, she says, is the identity economy. So not
Mm.
only is this person supposed to be someone I'm supposed to like be in love with, have amazing sex with, have children with, build a life together, but they also need to like make me the best version of myself.
Oh, yeah.
So, meaning like they have to be my best friend, my therapist, my confidant, we do everything together. Like they're my everything. And no way, nowhere in history, right? Nowhere in history has one person been able to fulfill an entire village for anyone,
Mm.
Right.
So when expectations are that high, it's like a natural setup for resentment, and
Mm.
couples feeling like, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I envisioned or fantasized or what we promised to each other at the podium. So
Mm.
yeah, divorce rates are high, 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 high.
But then
Um,
would the solution be low expectations or like
And I don't think it's lower expectations. I think it's realistic expectations because it
yeah,
sounds like a lot of the things that are influencing our expectations are media and movies and romance and
social
television
media,
and
yeah.
yeah, books and stuff like that. Because those are just, I mean, it sounds like we have our generation especially, we grew up on TV and in
yes,
Mm.
movies, and then we see all these things that like what a perfect couple is supposed to be like on film, and then when we get there, it's not exactly that way, and then we
Yeah.
get let down by those expectations that are
absolutely.
unrealistic, and those are all fiction. It's mostly based on fiction.
Yeah, that someone's written out. And
Yeah,
the other thing, Dan, I'm remembering is that in one generation, so our parents um generation, they used to get married really young, like
yes,
Mm.
their 20s. And so we had nothing, and the concept was we're going to build a life together,
Right.
right? We're going to start from nothing, we're going to build. Now we're like, that's crazy. If we see anyone graduate from high school and college and get married, we're like, what? Because now the model is you're going to be the best version of yourself, have financial security, or maybe have a house by then at the pinnacle of your career, and then you're going to find your soulmate who has the exact same thing. And but guess what, like marriage is reality, and once that kind of, wait, but this is the climax of our lives, like
Yeah.
cannot sustain, like why can't we just keep going higher from here? And that's another set of, I think, unrealistic fictional expectations that our generation has put upon ourselves,
Mm,
um, and like not settling for
Right.
less. It's like, what does that even mean? Because at the end of the day, we're all flawed. No one's perfect. We're all a work in progress.
Yes.
mm,
And that change is very unusual in human history. If you're looking at change and what like values or cultures or models for living have changed, is so drastic.
Right.
mm. I find that
So
so
some,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
the service
fascinating.
economy, identity economy, and you
Yeah,
see
she
that
calls it the
play.
identity economy.
Yeah, and you see that play out also in like in our social media nowadays of people, try a lot of, like you mentioned, like a lot of self-help, a lot of people seeking out mental
Yeah.
health, which is good, which is good. But then I think there's this unrealistic expectation of, oh, this partner will fulfill that hole, that
Everything.
that
Yeah.
gaping hole in my identity or my sense of self. But that's not the case. So yeah, we're coming up about an hour.
Whew.
So we'd like to, end with Dan. Sorry, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or yeah?
Oh, I just a couple things. Have you thought about while you're while it's still fresh in your mind, probably after
Yeah.
you're a kid, documenting the stories of your family. And then
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
the second thing is like the time capsule theory, uh, somewhat adjacent to it, not completely the same. But I was speaking with a friend, and her family immigrated from Vietnam at a
Mm,
certain age, and
mhm.
then now their Vietnamese is actually locked into that time period when they left.
Right.
When they go
Yes.
back, it's actually the phrasing is different, intonations are a little bit different. So it's something similar to what you're
Yeah.
thinking about or talking
Exactly.
about. And
Exactly.
this sounds like a great opportunity for you to write a book. Just
It's time,
saying.
I think to, yeah, start writing a book, right?
Yeah,
um uh, I love that. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think so many of our immigrant communities, like isolation is a big theme, right?
right,
And to go back home and to feel further isolated, I don't know. I just feel like a deep kind of collective sadness and some grief there. Like
right.
where do they belong, or where do they feel home at home?
Mm,
To your first question, um, there's so many modalities of drama therapy, but there's a section where there's performances.
Yes.
Yeah, like kind of therapeutic performances. So I have archived some
Oh, good.
family history, yeah, in the form of performances.
mm.
It's
Yeah.
great.
That's awesome. Yeah. I studied a little bit about psychotherapy when I was working on the Cho show. I was a
Oh,
performer in that. David Cho is an artist in LA. And
oh, yeah.
yeah, and there was yeah, we and I just found it so I found it, yeah, I that's a whole nother podcast is talking about drama therapy, I think. Yeah. But I do
I'll
find
do
it
another part two.
yeah, that'd
Yes.
be great. Yeah, yeah. So we did something. I'm not trained, by the way, so I'm yeah. So but it as part of the art show, we had participants, share a little bit about their history, and also and we would act out some of that history,
Mhm.
in a play space or in a so I just found it, yeah, it's a lot of unpacking that's happening. A lot of stuff is going on there. But having a safe space, as you mentioned in your blog about drama theory, having a safe space to play, adults playing,
Mhm.
I think that's great. And giving, I guess, maybe some distance to that traumatic event or
Yeah.
some of those events that still, trouble us, but giving that distance or that space to play with it, I do think is super important. Yeah. Yeah, so let's moving on to our next section would be Yeah, so so we're called yin and yang, so kind of like yin and yang.
Yeah,
So what are some things that you're doing nowadays to like, keep balanced with your life? I know it's a lot of stuff to juggle. You're on your second pregnancy,
I
you
know.
have your practice, and then yeah, and your husband.
I was like, what is balance during the season of my life? Does that even exist?
Right, right. Well, yeah,
Um,
maybe that's the balance is that this perfect balance doesn't exist. I don't know. Yeah.
I love that you asked the question because it made me kind of think like, what do I do? And you said daily because I feel
Yeah,
like if
what's
there
up?
are
Yeah.
things I do to, in like a month to like balance out everything. But I was like, what do I do on the day to day? Um, it probably doesn't happen all the time, but like sometimes my work gets really heavy, obviously, because I'm, dealing with trauma and so I, especially on my work days and yeah, especially on my work days, I really try to at least have one moment where there's something light or funny or playful, whether
Mm.
it's, watching something, but mostly with connection. So I'll like text a friend or call a friend or, and there's plenty of lightness and playful moments with my 3.5-year-old, but I make it, it's a fun age. I love this age
Yes.
so much. So that kind of happens naturally. I don't think I have to like be so intentional about it, but um, it's like when you take medicine and it's medicine,
Yeah.
it does a better job. So I go, right, like this is my kind of healing balm for the day. Um,
Oh.
and the other thing I think I have been trying to do is talk to someone. And I really mean like call or meet up with someone. And that's why I don't think it happens every day, but with
Mm.
someone that's not in my age cohort, because that's a rare thing nowadays to be in kind of multi-age families or multi-generational families or communities. So that naturally happens with my 3.5-year old,
Right.
but yeah, like to really seek out people, even like I'm a millennial, so have Gen Z friends or my Gen X friends and or a boomer, just talk to someone that's not in my age bracket,
Oh.
kind of shake up things for me, because I can really kind of get in my head about what's going on with me and this life stage. And,
Mm.
of course, I have my mom friends and my therapist friends, but we're all, in the same cohort. So I think that that's something I try to do to mix it up.
So kind of getting outside of your echo chamber, I guess, or
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And one way
yeah,
too. Yeah.
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 Awesome. All right, and then our last question is our language corner. Yay!
Hey.
So a language corner is basically a phrase or something that maybe we're learning in another language. One thing I've been hearing a little bit more of. I haven't seen Past Lives yet with Teo Yu. He was a previous guest on this podcast. Have you seen it yet?
On my
Or
list. No, it's on
yeah, yeah.
top of my list. That's the thing I need to watch next.
Yeah, so they talk about, I think I'm trying see if what's the Korean? I know in Chinese it's called 缘分. 缘分 is kind of like some people sometimes it's translated as destiny or fate, but
Ah, uh-huh.
the other but my understanding of it when I was speaking to Taiwanese people, Chinese people about it, it's more about like circumstances. Like this is how things
Mhm.
came together. So yeah,
Neon,
in English we
neon.
say fate or destiny, but there's a certain like gridlocked sensation when you say those words. For me at least, when I say those English words. But yuan fun is more like those things just came together. So like for instance, my wife and I we met in Taiwan, and we just say to each other, "Oh, that's yuan fun," like
Uh-huh.
it was during COVID. I wanted to get out of the U.S. There's a lot of stress I was having in the U.S. during the pandemic because anti-Asian hate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I got out, and she was in Taiwan for like getting out like she needed a break from like the Japanese work ethic, the work culture,
Mhm.
and so we came together and met at this time. So this culmination of events and circumstances led us together, and that we call that yuan fun. I think in Korean, correct me if I'm wrong. Let me find it. Is it like
Inyan. Inyan?
Inyan? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Inyan. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like
So
destiny. Or,
yeah, yeah. There's destiny.
um,
Yeah, yeah. Or like it, circumstances brought us together. Yeah, something like that. So
or if you
that's
believe in past
my
lives, right? Like you've had to meet many, many, many times to then also meet in this lifetime.
oh, that's
I think it's
romantic.
part of the
Yeah.
theory.
Yeah, yeah. Past, yeah. Yeah. So finally we met in this life. Yeah. So yeah, any phrases that you both are fond of or learned recently?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've actually been nerding out about it. So it was so funny that you asked that question. I was like, oh my gosh, great opportunity to kind of nerd out about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I was in Hong Kong. I do some teaching there, and
Oh
I
wow.
recently went this year. This year, I went in person after COVID, first time since COVID. I have some good colleagues there, and I do some teaching of drama therapy. And so when I'm there, I'm an English speaker, so I need a lot of translation.
Yes.
And I think it was the word. How do you say empathy in Chinese? Do you know?
Mm-mm.
Tongqing. So tong is means same, qing means like
Is that Mandarin?
feeling. That's
Yes.
Mandarin though, yeah.
So Cantonese. I'm
Ah,
pretty sure this like occurred in during this time. So I don't know. I don't. Yeah, we'd have to find it out. And I
Cantonese.
think it is in Cantonese. But
Cantonese.
empathy is kong kam in Korean. Kong kam.
Mm-hmm.
Kong kam. Hmm.
And then I had to look up empathy because I thought it was Latin and it wasn't. It was actually Greek. In Greek, it's in pathos. So pathos is feeling, but
Right.
the in is in, like internal. So it's a feeling within. So it's kind of very much self-focused, which is interesting because when we use the word empathy or be empathetic or have empathy, it's like in relation to. But
Right.
Right.
what's interesting in Korean, kong kam, is that kong is the same character for like shared or communal
Ah,
it's the same hong. I'm probably I don't have the inflection probably in Chinese, but it and then calm is feeling. So it's like this shared feeling. It's a collective feeling that has to be in relation to another person. And I was like, how perfect is that? That in this basic word that we throw around so much, especially in therapy, kind of
hmm.
circling back to that whole collectivistic versus individualistic way of being and values that
Yes.
even in empathy that yeah ours is really much based on kind of community the group or others in relation to and that the western definitions the root of it is actually to be like in touch within.
Right.
That's so interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
know.
it's not like one is better than the other. It's just a different modal, it's different models, right? Yeah. I
Different
mean,
roots of what the
roots.
meaning is, but we actually use it in the same way. We use the
Hmm.
like the word similarly with this notion of like put yourself in another person's shoes or feel what the other person is feeling.
Right.
So
I think
yeah,
this is yeah, gong
yeah. The Kong, I think
gong
when I Google translated, it's that
gonggan. Gong is
Kong.
like Gong is like it's the same character as like Gong Changdan, the like Communist Party. So
Oh yeah, yeah,
Gong,
exactly.
yeah,
Calm.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
Kong
then
had a calm. The root is calm, like
oh
communal,
yeah,
community, common,
yeah,
shared.
common, yeah, yeah. Gong, oh, interesting. That's so interesting. And
Kong Yan is like concerts because we're like listening together
as a, a group,
as a group. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, the language is so interesting because I've heard before Cantonese and Korean have a lot of like there's some stuff going on there like linguistically a lot of similarities. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Cool.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
Kong.
and thank you for sharing that. Eileen shared
The
the
Oh, the
Korean.
Korean
Korean.
spelling. Yeah,
Oh,
for
awesome.
empathy. And
Empathy.
there's
Yeah.
separate words for like feelings and emotions, but that's specifically the direct translation of empathy. So I'd be
Oh,
curious to know
awesome.
what it is in like Japanese
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Vietnamese. Yeah. If
I'll look it up and put in the show notes. Yeah, I
oh,
like to geek
great.
out about that stuff too. Yeah.
You
Dan,
can
do
do
you
the whole
have anything before we end?
I don't have a word for this week or
Okay,
this
that's
podcast.
no worries. Yeah, yeah. I think Japanese, yeah, empathy. Yeah, I
ask
know.
your wife. Yeah.
Yeah, I can ask my wife. I know for like the Jap, like a lot of because kanji comes from China, and so
Right.
there's a lot of like overlap with like the Chinese characters used in Japanese, and the same
Right.
having similar or the same meaning in Chinese. So, Tong maybe Tongqing or yeah, I'll look into it. But yeah,
Fun.
so Aileen, thank you so much for being our guest today. It was such a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for sharing all
Yeah, thanks for
your
listening.
knowledge with us today.
This
Is
is
your
fun.
is your mom still making kimchi, by the way?
Oh, no, we make it.
Oh, you make it. If
Yes, she's given us has Jennifer told you her
no,
kimchi?
I remember I
Oh,
looked it up on Facebook and you were selling it at one point and I asked you about it.
yes.
And it was like it was because you were in the Bay Area and now we were already down
Yes.
here and I was like, hey, I kind of want some kimchi.
My husband makes it. It's my mother's recipe. Yeah, we make my mom's kimchi, and that's one of our like, I guess like every
Side
other
hustles.
month way to be balanced, stay balanced. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll give you kimchi.
Oh, do you also do the radish one too?
I don't. I
Mm,
like it. I don't know why we don't. No, we just kind of stick to the same like
Napa
ritualistic
cabbage,
Napa
yes.
cabbage. Yeah. Yeah. But
Okay.
my mom's
Awesome.
like two secret ingredients goes in it. It's
Oh.
so
Oh,
good.
wow.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, I guess
Deal.
where can people find you? And I mean,
Ah,
you're not accepting new clients until September. I saw. Okay. But
yeah,
if people
everyone's
want to know more about your work and like
yeah.
get more information, I guess your website is that the best place?
Yes.
Okay, so
And they
please,
email me in the next month. They can say hi.
yeah.
After a month, I'm gonna have my away message. But yeah, and then my email. Yeah, fun
So
times.
yeah, for our listeners, please go to if you want to get more information about Aileen, sorry,
Aileen.
Aileen, please go to AileenBCho.com. So that's spelled AILEENBCHO.com. That's where you can find her work, and she has some great blogs that you can check out as well, talking about a lot of things that we've mentioned today. Also, you can email her at aileen@aileenbcho.com. So that's AILEEN at AILEENBcho.com. And yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I guess be well, be balanced, be healthy, and we'll talk soon.